Hi, welcome to Branded. I'm Mariah. Today I have two friends with me, fellow survivors, and we have a lot to talk about. Thank you guys so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about your background.
I can definitely start us off. Just a little bit of background on me. I was born in California, but I was raised here in Phoenix, Arizona. I have lived here since I was 5 and grew up in a very Christian home. My parents were married. I had siblings, and at a very young age, I started being groomed. And by the age of 11, I was being trafficked by a family member. And that is what we consider familial trafficking. And so I was in that lifestyle from 11 to 18 years old. We functioned in a church. From the outside, we had the very American family. We had what we needed. But behind closed doors, we would have men come in and out of our house. I started recognizing that something was off with my family, and around 14, and started running away consistently. And then I was trafficked over in the Dominican Republic and on the terms of being a missions trip. And I was told that I had to either follow what was being asked of me at home, or I was going to be left over in the Dominican Republic. And it was very scary over there for me, and so I had made the choice. I was like, whatever, just take me home, like I'll do whatever you want. And so that was kind of my lifestyle up until 18 years old. I struggled with an eating disorder and self-harm, and it just really took a toll on my life.
I'm so sorry, because I had to say that because I didn't know all that. Jay, do you want to tell us a little bit about where you're coming from too?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Beaverton, Oregon. I grew up in a middle-class family. I was actually adopted when I was 4 years old. Both of my parents worked. They had pretty decent jobs. But I had a little bit of behavioral issues. I went to private schools, and then I started going to public school when I entered into elementary, like 2nd or 3rd grade elementary. I played a lot of sports. I was on swim team. I was in chess club. So I was a pretty, well-rounded kid. I had a lot of after-school activities that I did. When I entered into middle school, I started acting out a little bit more. I was very sheltered. My parents were very strict. And so when I was 14 years old, I decided that I wanted to run away from home. At that time, I was still a virgin. Like I said, I was very sheltered. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And that's when my trafficking began.
And that was at 14?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So I just think it's so insane that we all have such different stories. I grew up single mom, struggling to keep us together most of the time. And once again, like you said, like trafficker walked in, has all the answers to all the questions, and I fell for it. And I was at 17. So it's strange to me that as different as our stories are, when we met, we were able to connect because of understanding that part of each other.
Yeah.
And I'm just so glad you guys are here today. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, just because, we all do have that different story, but within it all leads to the same thing. Like we all went through the control, the power, the manipulation, all of that. So that's what kind of brought us together was, even in the difference, that there were the similarities.
Yeah. So today, you guys, I know as you probably have heard around social media and everything, human trafficking, save the children. It's a big thing right now, which is strange because a couple years ago, when you told people, they were like, "What? That happens here?" But yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because from what I've seen, like as encouraging as it is that people are talking about it, that people are starting to become aware that it's happening here, it's also kind of frustrating because I feel like with all the like memes that are being posted and nobody's fact checking what they're saying, you know, and just different things, it's kind of reinstalling that same like white van pull up and snatch your child away, and it's just, it doesn't happen that way. Not that it couldn't, just that it doesn't really look like that. And so I'm just curious, like, how do you guys, seeing all of that now, like how does that make you feel?
I feel like it just kind of paints a really, not necessarily an incorrect picture, but it kind of tunes people's attention towards other things. It's not necessarily what trafficking always looks like, but it's interesting the amount of attention this is getting, but yet people aren't really doing the hard work and getting educated and finding out how to prevent this. It's becoming one of those things that everyone is just talking about. And the question is what are you really doing?
Yeah.
What are you really doing to prevent this from happening in your neighborhood and the schools? So.
Right, and I think too, like social media has been so big, like that's where people go to get their information. And social media provides like a lot of false information regarding sex trafficking, Hollywood. There's just this false like idea of trafficking, of that it is, you know, the white van, or for here in Phoenix, the Arizona Mills Mall. I will not tell you how many, they're like, you're gonna get kidnapped and trafficked there, and like, which I'm sure it has happened, but like the majority of it is, you know, it's from someone you know. And so with these hashtags, sex trafficking is like a hot button or a hot topic that we call it. And you know, people want to be on the end, and so they'll post these things without like making it look like to feel cool or feel a need in them that they're a part of the movement, when they're not really taking any action. So yes, like these posts are great for that awareness, they're great for that, but it doesn't stop with that post. There needs to be action after that comes from that. So
Yeah.
And just to touch on what you were saying about the Hollywood part of it. I mean, when I was out there, I've been to Los Angeles. Like, I've walked out there, Hollywood Boulevard. I've had strange calls in California. But it's funny because, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, when I was out there, you could feel, you know, that the spirit, the evilness out there. So it is there. That is a thing, but it's not all of it, because that's not the only city that I was in. You know, that's not the only place that this happened. And so it's like you said, it just kind of paints the wrong picture of it so that people think this is the whole thing, and it's not like that. Like, it's just not.
yeah. Well, even with like the movie Taken, I will not, like, when I'm out there like doing awareness and stuff like that, and people are like, oh, it's like Taken, the movie. And you're like, no, like that is not what it is at all. Like, it's a fairy tale of like what you wish would happen, that someone would come and rescue that way, but that's not the reality of it. A lot of times it's American kids being here in American
by Americans.
Yeah. So
And we have to figure
Bought
out
and
how
sold
to
by Americans.
Right.
And we have to figure out how to claw our way out, not not get rescued out, which is unfortunate. But yeah, for sure. So I'm just curious, for you guys. I mean, obviously I know my part of it, but like when you were there, what kept you in that situation? Because I think so many people, they think you're either tied down, you know, in a basement, or, you know, they don't understand, like, yes, there is a little bit of the leash that you get to walk out on, but it's still not like freedom. So what was it for you that kept you in this place that you technically might have were able to get out of, but not really?
Well, for me, I guess mine is just a little bit different because I was born into mine. So it was instilled to me at a very young age that God put me on this earth to serve men, and that was my duty. And so for me, like, if I didn't do that, then I was out of line with what I was supposed to be doing, what my purpose was. I was baptized by a pastor who was involved in my trafficking, and I was baptized in the sense of I was agreeing that that's why God put me on this earth. And so for me, there was like a hold because that was my family and that was what I was taught, which isn't the case for everyone. And there were instances where I was bound and I was handcuffed to a bed for days on end. But that was my normal. That was what I was raised to be. So it wasn't until I was older that I learned that that's not correct, and it's real life looks very different.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Yeah. I think that for myself, it's easy when we talk about domestic violence survivors and stuff, and when we think about when they try and leave, how long it takes them. You know, I think they say that they'll go back to them 7 times before they actually leave. And I can say that that's probably very similar for the cases when you're trying to leave out of a trafficking situation. For myself, I didn't realize that I was being groomed, and I was also very young, so I looked at him like he was my everything.
Yeah.
He was my boyfriend, he was my friend, he was my support, he was my protector in some cases. But I didn't realize how much damage was being done by me putting myself out there. Well, in reality, him putting me out there. So it was honestly just me being so brainwashed that I didn't see the problem in it. So leaving wasn't something that I ever thought about doing. It's like when you have a bad boyfriend and everyone around you is telling you that he's bad and you think that he's good, so you just love him and you never want to leave him. And so it took me a very long time in order to get to a place to where I could stand on my own 2 feet, to where I felt comfortable making my own decisions, because for a long time I didn't. I breathed him. That's who I needed. I felt like I needed him. And without him, I didn't feel like I was anything. But that was one of the things that was instilled in me, that without him, I was going to be nothing, that I was going to be unsuccessful, that no one would ever love me, that no one would ever accept me for my past. So I didn't leave until I was 19, and I still stayed in that lifestyle because that's what I knew.
I think it was the same for me. It was like all these things that were put onto me, these mental states that were given to me by somebody else. It was like, that's just the truth. That's what it is, and that's what I accepted. And so, like you said, like leaving never crossed my mind because I was convinced I was that, and that was how life was gonna be. So it just wasn't an option, because then what, you know? So
and that's what I have the option and privilege to work with survivors who are minors and adults. And just from what I've seen, like the majority of it is when they have these Romeo pimps that come in and they fantasize and they promise you this lifestyle, and they see your vulnerabilities and they prey on that, and they take those vulnerabilities and fill that need and provide that family aspect and that love and belonging that majority of people are looking for. And then they'll flip that and use that against you. And so and then at that point you're just so far gone that you're just like,
yeah,
dang, how did I get here?
It's just crazy to me, like how those things carried over. Like even now that you know, like I've talked about in our previous video, I just passed my 5-year mark. And so 5 years later, after everything ended, there's still things that that come up from back then, those thoughts and mentalities that I was given that still affect me. So just to give you an example, it's now very hard for me to be around what I would say like normal men, like who are married and just nice, you know, and whatever, living their regular life. They're not trying to harm me or buy me or do anything inappropriate. But I feel like I'll get to this really strange place where it's like, what if I do something inappropriate and incite that? Or are they gonna just switch all of a sudden and become, you know, this person who wants to either sell me or buy me or whatever, you know? So now, like, even all these years later, just being around my pastor or, you know, just my boss or whoever, it's like I'll get into these situations where I know that like it's gonna switch and it's gonna be that again. And so all these years later, I still struggle just having a normal conversation with a normal, healthy human. And so is there anything like, I mean, I'm sure there's a million things, but is there anything that you can think of right off bat that's like, that's something all this time later that I know it still hits?
I mean, I just kind of similar with what you were saying, like, I think for me, because starting very young, like that was instilled in me, that was my purpose. So I'm constantly like, I don't have a ton of relationships with males. I try to stay from that just because I'm constantly like, okay, well, what do they want from me? What are they needing from me? Like, what need do I need to meet? And so I'm like constantly having to like fight that mentality and like reframe my thoughts of like, no, like that was a lie. Like that is not truth. That is not what you're put on this earth for. So I think that's something, that mentality.
I think for myself, I've just become really like protective of myself. After you have someone that take advantage of you to that level and you finally get to a place to where you understand really the depth of it, it makes you look at people differently. I don't really like being vulnerable. I know that I can function with a shell. I feel safest around people that can relate to my experience. And I think that comes from, it's almost like a healthy trauma bond. Like, you know my pain, so you know how this feels. So it really, it's made it really hard because people that do try and get close to me, I tend to push them away because I'm like, I don't trust you because you could be coming around just to benefit from me, my story, whatever. So I'm just really, really cautious. Right now in my life, I'm learning to tread lightly with who it is that I'm associating myself with, just because of those fears. And I feel like that comes up at different times, and making sure that I'm not putting myself in situations where I'm being used.
Definitely. And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, even as like, you know, taking that back to sex trafficking being a hot button of, you know, there is like this hype around like knowing a survivor or like, you know, having a survivor involved. And like at times, like, you know, even as a survivor, you have to be mindful of like who you're letting in and who you're sharing your story with, because you could be re-exploited by sharing your story. And so filtering through, okay, like who are like the genuine ones, which has been really cool, because you'll notice like the genuine ones are like, you know, you tell them something and they're like, dang, thank you so much for telling me that. Like, I would never want you to feel uncomfortable or that, like things like that. So yeah, so just even that, with that being like a hot topic, like a hot button again, so.
And I think there's such a misconception that once you are out of this situation, like once you're not being trafficked anymore, once you're not being harmed anymore directly, that everything is just fine, and you should be able to just go back to normal life and, you know, not think of, well, not deal with the aftermath of it. And I think that is a problem, especially like we see it in, you know, people who are trying to recover, who are trying to rebuild their lives. It's like, well, now you're not in crisis, so go out there and live your life, you're fine. And that's not truthful. I mean, like I said, it's been 5 years for me, and I know I could run down a list of things that come up daily that I struggle with. And so with that being said, is what needs to happen after that crisis is over? Because there's such a disconnect. We don't see services. We don't see people being focused on, you know, someone who's been out for a while. So what do you think needs to happen? Because I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, and this is going to be a revolving conversation. It's not like we have all the answers, but this is definitely like the three of us had sat down and had countless hours of like discussing of like, dude, what needs to happen? Because we have a lot of services for our kiddos who are coming out, and a lot of services for adults who are coming out. But it's like once you're out and there's been that extended time, there's not a lot of support. And I know for myself, like something that I struggle with is I still do have PTSD, and I've definitely learned coping skills, and I've learned like ways to manage, and I've gotten better. But of course, like you said, it's not like you can just go back to normal life. Like it is a process, and it's probably going to be a lifelong process of relearning and recovering from this. But I think definitely like one thing that I think would be great would be outpatient services for survivors, because we do have these big organizations, but it's all like you got to go inpatient to get that treatment. But for people who are out in the community and not necessarily in crisis, just having like an outpatient location specific for trafficking, where people understand the mentality and the mindset and just kind of what we've gone through. Because explaining it to a counselor who's like has no idea, like you're not, it's very hard.
Yeah. And I think like too, a lot of people, they want to be like the hero of it, like I rescued this girl, but then it's like the real hero is the one who all this time later asks you like, hey, are you okay? Like, are you really okay? You know? Yeah. And because as we both know, like a lot of people don't make it out, because we might make it out for a minute and then go back, because once you're out of crisis, trying to figure out real life is a whole nother battle. It's almost worse, because you're dealing with all of this stuff from the past and now. And trying to navigate it. And
with that like hero mentality of savior, I want to come in and save them. Like, because it's such a hot topic, they want to be the one that like, oh, I helped this survivor, and like, which is great, but you may help that survivor that moment, but that survivor is going to need continual support. And again, it's the one who's been there consistently and checking in and all of that, and staying even when there's a crisis, even when we fall. Because I'll tell you, there are days that I'm like, dang, I need support. And so like I have my support people that I can go to, and they haven't walked away. Because the ones who are in it for like the glam or like the savior mentality, they're going to get frustrated with the survivor, and they're going to walk away and leave that survivor even more broken than when they found them.
And I'm sure all of us can speak to that, because and that's the worst part. It's like, okay, you you say that you have this interest, but I think that people don't understand how multifaceted like the damage is. And so maybe either they don't know what they're getting themselves into by saying they want to help, or they have themselves in it, you know, rather than the person that they're trying to help.
Yeah.
It almost makes like the whole awareness, like people becoming aware, is almost I don't want to say annoying, because that sounds insensitive, but it's like you know, I was in this for almost 8 years and I didn't have not one person ask me like, are you okay? It just wasn't there. So now that everybody wants to be talking about it, is like, what are you really doing? Like
Or
we
how
said
many
earlier.
people have you really overlooked? Yeah.
And so with that being said, like if you were gonna tell somebody this is what you not should be doing, but like could be doing, rather than just posting a meme or, you know, saying something about it, like what could people be doing to actually help? And especially, like we said, the people who are not in that crisis moment, but after, like, what is there that that we can tell people to do? Because I definitely think that you should tell them something.
Right. I mean, I personally believe that every single person has a role in this movement. And, you know, maybe your role is just awareness. But I think with awareness, like, also comes education. So not just do like posting a post. Like, I feel like, you know, if you want to get involved, start doing your research, check out like legit websites that have been tracking like the statistics and tracking this issue of trafficking, which Polaris is a really great one. Like, get on there, do the research and learn what you can. Reach out to local agencies. I think that would be another way, is find out what services your city or your area has in place and reach out to them and see what needs. And because you could do something as little as like donating stuff to an organization, or you can go as far as being an advocate and walking along a survivor. There's literally roles from like just education all the way to like you're walking on the front lines and really making a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know, what do you think, Jade? What else?
I'm just going to piggyback off of what you said, but contacting the local organizations in the area and seeing what services that they do provide and becoming familiar with those services so that you can provide them to individuals that may need those services. Also, another one that I've been seeing a lot of is the education of like healthcare professionals and stuff like that. I know
Teachers
that,
too.
and teachers and people that are in positions to where they may encounter these kind of individuals that are going through this kind of stuff. I know that for myself, I had been to the hospital, you know, and I was in a place where I may have spoke. If someone would have asked me if something bad was happening to me, I may have said something. But just making sure that we're educating our youth, educating, you know, the vulnerable populations about what's going on and how to reach out and how to ask for help. Because sometimes asking for help is the scariest part. Now, receiving the help can be pretty scary too, but asking for help is really hard.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, like you guys said, like it's local organizations. It's not far away.
I really think it's important, like, you know, catching the kids' vulnerabilities, like, when they're young. And so really, like, another area is like pouring into our youth and catching it before it becomes an issue. And so I think it's important to know, like, you know, whether it's volunteering with youth, if you have kids, making sure that they're involved in like social media. I know you guys had a video on that, but like that is so big of when kids go unmonitored on their social media. And so something like Jade and I do outside of here is because where we're located, there are not a lot of organizations that work with before. A lot of it's geared towards after. And so like even getting into the schools, schools to have education around this is so hard. It's so hard. But we need it. And so Jade and I partner and we try to come and like meet our kiddos where they're at. And really pour into them and educate them around social media and like what has happened to kind of try and fill that gap so they're not out there looking in the world for someone to like love and accept them. And so even if it's checking on your own kids and, you know, get in their business, like you're not their friend, like you're their parent, like get in their business, get involved with what they're doing, I think is another really important aspect of it.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you so much for being here. I mean, this was just incredible for the three of us, you know, survivors, to sit and talk about some of these things that don't get heard. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. Like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any comments, feel free to leave them below. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you next time.